All right, so we are up to Nature of Nusach Part 3. Okay, we'll do a quick review of what we did last time, and then we'll go on and I'll tell you what the plan is after we do the review. So, review. Maybe I'm not going to even read inside, okay, because this is already the third part. So I feel like the people who, if you missed the second part, whatever. Anyway, okay, um, so Midoraisa, then there's no set text of tefillah. Each person does it in his own formulation, his or her own formulation, as long as you do Shevach, Bakasha, and Hoda'ah. Then, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, Jews got intermingled into the other nations and spoke mixtures of languages. And it was problematic because they couldn't formulate their requests entirely in Hebrew, or they couldn't praise God entirely in Hebrew. So Ezra, and the way I explained that is that their ideas and concepts got mixed up, so they couldn't even think properly of their own needs or think about ideas about God accurately. So Ezra and Hezbasian came along and set up the tefillah d'Rabbanan that we're familiar with today, of the three tefillos a day and all the brachos and the davening times. And they made this so that Rambam says, in order that they should be arranged in everyone's mouths so that they can learn them, and so that the tefillah of these stammers could be a perfect prayer like the tefillah of one who possesses clear speech. So that was part one. Okay, then in part two, we examined the question, what exactly was this Nusach that they created? So I went over the big myth about Nusach, is what people believe, the average Jew, I think, believes that Ezra has basically created a word for word text of davening, much like our own siddur. Okay, obviously not as long, because our siddur has a lot of stuff that accrued over the years. But certainly, let's say Shemon Esrei and the text of the brachos, they wrote the exact text. And then over time, due to the dispersion and the fact that the tefillos were not written down, it was kept bal peh until Rav Amram Gaon wrote it down the first siddur. Then differences emerged. So that was the myth. But then we saw in four sources, or really, five sources at least. We saw the academic Yehuda Heinemann, and then Shadal, and then the Rashba, and the Meiri, and Saadia Gaon, who all said that Chazal never established a word for word siddur. Rather, the original Nusach consisted of the number of brachos to be said on each occasion. So, 18 or 19 in the Shemon Esrei, 7 on Shabbos and Yom Tov, brachos before you eat, brachos before you smell things, brachos after you eat stuff. Okay, the inyan of the bracha, the main content, theme, or subject, the matbea of the bracha, which I'm translating as the format, okay, whether it's a long bracha that begins with Baruch and ends with Baruch, or whether it's short form where there's just one Baruch Atah. And then in some cases, they had particular words that need to be said. Like, for example, mentioning bris and Torah in the second bracha of Birkas Hamazon, or mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim and Malchas Bechoros and Kriyas Yamsuf in Emes V'Yatziv, and things like that. Okay, but the middle of the brachos, the substance of the bracha was left to the individual and to the community to formulate. And that's where many of the different nuschos came from, is that different communities had different I guess people who wrote the brachos, or different like customs. And then, yeah, there were still other micro changes that came from evolution of the siddur, but this is what accounts for these drastic differences in the brachos. And just, I know, some of you are in my modim shir on Wednesday nights, but I just want to show you an example from modim that we went through there, which was, if you look at our version of modim, which we're familiar with, you basically have the theme of, we thank Hashem as our God and the God of our forefathers. We describe him as, preserving our lives, and then the miracles that are done every day, and his mercies and kindnesses don't run out. And it's good to thank God. Okay. But then what I presented in the shir was an example of another nusach of modim that was found in the Cairo Geniza, from like the 7th century, which says like this: Modim anachnu lach ata, so we gratefully acknowledge you. Ata hu Hashem Elokeinu ve'Elokei avosenu. You are our God and the God of our forefathers. Okay, so that part is the same as ours. Okay, but then we say, it says, Al kol hatovos v'hachesed v'harachamim shagamolasnu, for all of the good and the kindness and the mercy that you bestowed upon us, v'sha'asisa imanu, and that you did with us, v'im avosenu, and with our fathers, milfanenu, before us, v'im amarnu mate raglenu, and if we say our feet are faltering, then your kindness, Hashem, will support us. Baruch Hashem, hatov l'cha lahodos. Blessed are you, Hashem, the good one. To you one should give thanks. Okay, so if you look at it, really the only things that are the same are the very beginning and the very end of the bracha. In this version, there's no mention of our lives that are in your hands or the miracles that are done every day. So it's very different. So again, this is just, I mean, there are many examples of this, but this is just another example where clearly when Chazal set this up, they said you should say, we thank you, and something about calling God Hatov and saying that it's good to give thanks to him. But the middle of the bracha was left up to people's formulation, and different formulations emerged. Okay, so that was, and then one more thing also to review. I gave the analogy of the myth is that the original Nusach was like a screenplay where the director gives you some leeway to like ad lib, but you're really sticking to the script. And obviously, if you try to like ad lib to the point where it changed, the meaning of a sentence, then there are many directors who say like, no, you can't do that. But then the truth is that the original Nusach was much more like long form improv, where you're given a specific prompt and you have to riff on that prompt, but you can say whatever you want. So if I say scene is, you go into a restaurant and there's a couple that's fighting and then the waiter gets involved. So you can say whatever words you want, but if you start talking about like a doctor in a hospital, so then you're off script and then you're violating the improv rules. All right. So that was the big myth. And then we ended off with a couple questions, but the question that I wanted to focus on that I ended off with is inspired by the Ian Malcolm quote from Jurassic Park, which I actually got finally, which is, he says, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. And so the question that we ended off with is, just because we can make such changes, does that mean that this is a good idea and something we should do? Okay. And the answer is there's tension in the sources. Okay. And the tension is there are people who are basically, and this is at all times in history, I think, pushing for maximum creativity and changes, and then there are people who are conservatives with lowercase c of you shouldn't make any changes, and they do that for different reasons. Okay, so there is a lot of tension there, and that has not been resolved to this day. Okay, so I wanted to explore that in today's share. So any questions about those concepts that we went over from before, or any questions to add to the pile we had a couple of outstanding questions. For example, if there wasn't a set text, why was it so hard for the average Jew to daven? Okay, meaning if even after Ezra and his Beis Din created this, then why couldn't the average Jew daven? And then doesn't that defeat the purpose of Ezra and his Beis Din creating a Nusach to begin with? The whole point was that they couldn't daven all in Hebrew, and now we're saying that there was no set like script. Okay, and then the other question is, what about other languages? What about other languages? I forgot what that question was. I just wrote that. Was that just the normal question of how is it that Ezra and his Beis Din allowed us to daven in other languages if the whole problem is other language? I'm not sure what that question was. Okay, any other questions that you have on what I said, or questions you want to add to the pile? Okay, so I'll tell you what I had planned, and then why the plans fell apart, and then what we're going to do. Okay, so what I planned to do was to examine the Rambam, and the Rambam is one of the voices that has pushed for conservatism of not changing the tefillah and not writing your own tefillos. And what I wanted to do was to examine the strong word is contradiction, weak word is like inconsistency, or like difference of presentation in the two sources in the Rambam, where he talks about not changing the brachos. And I wanted to go through a bunch of different resolutions to the Rambam's contradiction. But what happened was, for the second night in a row, I had insomnia, and I had enough energy and focus to finish writing my article. But then when I started preparing for this year, I just could not concentrate enough to make sense of these sources. So what I think we should do is, I do want to examine this Rambam, at least to set it up. And I want to try to read through the Kesef Mishneh, but it's possible my mind will just not compute. And we'll have to set that aside for later. But what I would like to do is I'd like to start compiling, in 2021, I think I gave a shiur on why we shouldn't change the text of the tefillah. And I think we compiled 8 reasons why it's ill-advised to change the list, to change the text of tefillah that we have. And I want to go through some of the sources I went through last time and start compiling a new list And I just want to let it develop organically instead of like consulting my old list, because my view of tefillah, of the Nusach of tefillah, has changed. Okay, so that's the game plan for today: is examine the contradiction in the Rambam, and then try to come up with a list of reasons why you might not want to tamper with the text of tefillah, and go through some of the sources on that. Okay. Okay, so let's go through the sources in the Rambam. So first one is in Hilchos Kriya Shema, where he says, and I'm going to highlight the phrases that are most that are going to be the center of the problem. Brachos elu, these blessings, and here he's talking about the blessings of the Shema. Im shar kol habrachos ha'aruchos b'fi kol Yisrael, and the other blessings that are arranged in the mouths of Israel, of Jewry. Ezra ubeis din tiknum. Ezra and his beis din established them. Ve'in adam rashai lefachos mehen velo lahosif alehen, and no one is permitted to detract from them or add to them. Makom shihiskinu lachtom babaruch, wherever they enacted that you should conclude with the phrase Baruch Atah Hashem, eno rashai shelo lachtom, you are not free to not conclude with it. Makom shihiskinu shelo lachtom, and wherever they decreed that you should not conclude with Baruch Atah Hashem, eno rashai lachtom, then you're not permitted to conclude with that. Makom shihiskinu shelo liftoach babaruch, a place where they enacted to not begin with Baruch Atah, eno rashai liftoach, then you're not permitted to begin with it. Makom shihiskinu liftoach, and a place where you're they enacted to begin with Baruch, eno rashai shelo liftoach, you're not permitted to not begin with it. Klalo shel davar, kol hameshana mimatbea shetavu chachamim bebrachos, hare ze toeh v'chozer u'mavarech kamatbea. Here's the general rule: where whoever changes the matbea, which again literally means the coinage or the formulation or the format of the bracha that was minted by the sages in brachos, is making a mistake, or behold, this person's making a mistake, and he must go back and make a bracha according to the matbea, according to the coinage. Okay, that's source number one. Source number two is in the in Hilchos Brachos Perek Aleph Halacha Hey, which says, the Nusach Kol HaBrachos, the formulation, okay, formulation is better than the text, formulation of all the brachos, Ezra Beis Din Tiknum. Okay, so he calls it here, so you notice he never mentioned the Nusach in the first one. He just says all of the brachos were enacted by Ezra and his Beis Din, but here he says the Nusach of all the brachos, Ezra and his Beis Din, were enacted by Ezra and his Beis Din. But in Roy L'Shanosen, it is not proper to change them. V'lo lahosif al achas mehen v'lo ligroa mimena, nor to add to one of them, nor to detract from it. V'chol hameshana mimatbea shetavu chachamim bebrachos, and anyone who changes from the matbea that the sages minted in brachos, eno ella toeh, is only making a mistake. V'chol bracha she'en bahas karas Hashem u'malchus ena bracha ella im kein haisa smucha l'chavita. And any bracha that doesn't mention the name and kingship of God is not a bracha, unless it followed after its after another bracha. Hold on, I for some reason deleted one more halacha that's relevant here. Give me 1 second, Esti. Oops, just a second. What's going on? Where is the other halacha? Brachos 1a. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I meant to quote halacha 6 also. And then in halacha 6, oh man, the source sheet's messy. All right, in halacha 6, he says, Kol brachos kulan ne'emarim b'chol lashon. All the brachos can be said in any language. V'hu sheyomar inyan shetiknu chachamim, provided you say it in accordance with the inyan, the theme, concept, or subject instituted by the sages. V'im shina es matbea, and if he changed the matbea, hoyo v'hizkir azkara u'malchus v'inyan habracha, then since he mentioned a divine name, kingship, and the inyan of the bracha, afilu b'lashon chol yata, even in a secular language, then he has fulfilled his obligation after the fact. Okay, yeah, Esti, what was your question?
I just wanted to ask, I'm sorry, if you could restate the framework in which we're reading this halachos. What is it that we're getting at through, like, what are we looking at and reading it?
So what we're trying to get at, so the macro question that this series is on is, what is the nature of the formulations of the tefillos and brachos that we have? And then the micro question that we have today is, since last time we saw that there is a lot more flexibility in and creativity in changing the text of the brachos, that we saw from the other sources. What does the Rambam hold about that? Because the Rambam is one of the most conservative voices, where he like seemingly is anti-changing the brachos. So we're trying to get what his position is, but we are confronted with a contradiction, which we haven't yet formulated, between these two sources.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the contradiction? I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these sources into the chat so you can have them all, because I can't put them all on the screen. So there's the one in Kriya Shema. Here's the one in the translation, and then here is brachos aleph hey. Here's brachos aleph hey, and then here's brachos aleph vav, and then here's brachos aleph vav. Yeah. So did anyone catch the contradiction? Yeah, I can't really display them all on the screen. Oh, can I? Yeah. Okay. No. Well, that's the best I could do. Yeah, Ayala.
So in the first one at the end, he says that, yeah, you have to go back if you change the matbea.
Yeah.
But in halacha 6, it seems like he's saying as long as you say Hashem's name, Malchus, and the Inyan, then you're
Okay, good.
Yotzei.
Okay, good. So that is the main contradiction here. Okay, so questions or problems. One is in Hilchos Kriyas Shema. I'll make this bigger now. In Hilchos Kriyas Shema, he says, whoever changes. Second here, he says, whoever changes the matbea that was minted by the sages, is making a mistake, and he must go back and say the bracha again in accordance with the matbea. Okay, but in Hilchos brachos, he says that if you changed the matbea, then as long as you mention God's name, kingship, and the inyan of the bracha, then you fulfill the obligation. Okay, which is it? All right, so that's going to be the main question. Okay, is that clear? Yeah, Ayala.
Another question on
Yeah.
Hilchos Kriyas Shema.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what the which one's called? What the like first he says like a general statement, and then he says that you can't like speaks about the beginning, like the concluding and opening brachos, that you can't like take or change those or whatever. So how does that relate to the first clause? Is it like an example? Is it like saying like clarifying what the first clause means?
Oh, when you say the first clause, are you referring to the thing I highlighted here?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, good. So that is a good question. Is that what is the relationship between let's just say, I'm just trying to think how to formulate this here. Do you have another possibility in mind when you ask that? Because it does sound like he gives 4 examples and then he gives the universal.
I guess I was wondering when it says no one is permitted to detract from them or add to them.
Yeah.
Is he then saying that like adding or detracting a bracha, or is he
Okay.
talking about the inyan?
Okay, good. All right, that is what I was hoping you meant. Okay. What is the difference between in Hilchos Kriya Shema, where he says, and no one is permitted to add or to detract from them or add to them. And I'm going to make this into a question on both of them. In Hilchos Brachos, where he says, it's where he says, it is not proper to change them, nor to add to one of them, nor to detract from it. Okay. The language he uses is slightly different. And the examples he gives in Hilchos Kriya Shema seem to indicate that these are talking about two different things. Okay, is that a fair summary of your question? Okay, yeah, Tamar.
So with regard to question one about like whether or not you have to, let's say, go back,
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, it doesn't really seem like this, but could you say that somehow this in halachos Kriya Shema is talking specifically about halachos Kriya Shema with regard to that
Okay.
halacha?
Yes, there are people who want to say that. Yeah. It is interesting though, because he does start like he's saying, these brachos and all the other brachos, Ezra has basically enacted them, and it's not proper to add to them, to detract from them or add to them. So you know, it does seem like he's talking about all brachos, and then he also says the general rule. But there are people who want to answer on the basis of what you're observing, which is that maybe there's something about, maybe somehow the scope of his statement is like restricted to something about brachos of Kriya Shema. Yeah, because if it were just the brachos of Kriya Shema, he would just say brachos elu ein adam raya lefachos mehen, but he, instead of mentioning all the other brachos. Yeah. Okay. Another question I have is, and this is a question that I've always just been bothered by, because Rambam is very specific with his language, is what does he mean when he says, I guess, hold on. What does he mean in Hilchos Kriya Shema when he says about someone who changes the matbea, that, sorry, hare ze toeh. Okay, this person is making a mistake. And in Hilchos Brachos, when he says a slightly different thing. Eino ella toeh. Eino ella toeh. He is only making a mistake. Okay, like what is the general meaning of mistake here? Okay, which is weird halachic terminology. Okay, right? In other words, like if you say, for example, if I eat matzah, before Tseis HaKochavim, we say you're either yote or not yote. You don't say you're making a mistake. Like it's just a weird. I can't think of a single other case where we see that. And is there a difference between these subtly different expressions? Yeah. Okay. And then the overarching question, obviously, which we said, but I'll just write it down, is to what extent would the Rambam be fine with changes in the text, in the Nusach HaBracha, and then on a lechatchila level and on a bediavad level, right? So, for example, this halacha vav is definitely bediavad, that if you change the matbea, then since you mentioned God's name and kingship in the end of the bracha, then you're yotze bediavad. But would the Rambam permit any like initial changes and say like, oh yeah, you have a total right to do that? So that's the overarching question. Okay, so let's actually, unless you have an idea that you're burning to say, let's look at the Kesef Mishneh. Okay, because again, I'm not feeling like I'm up to like my own analysis here. So let's just try to understand this. Again, this might fail. We'll see what happens. Okay, so he says like this. I'm gonna translate it myself because I did not trust ChatGPT on that. Okay, so he says, so the Kesef Mishneh first brings down the Rambam source. Okay, so this is on Hilchos Brachos 1.5. Okay, not on Kriya Shema. This is on Ein Roy Lashanosan. It's not proper to change them, nor to add to one of them, nor to detract. And anyone who changes from the matbea is only making a mistake. So he says, Periketan Mavarchin in Brachos 40b. It says, Ra'a pas na'eh. If a person saw beautiful bread, and said, Kama na'eh pazo. How beautiful is this bread? Baruch hamakom shebara'a. Blessed be the foundation of existence, hamakom, who created it. Okay. Or ra'a te'ina na'eh, if he saw a beautiful fig, va'amar, and said, how beautiful is this fig? Baruch hamakom shebara'ah. Blessed is the foundation of existence, who created it. Yatsa, he has fulfilled his obligation. Okay, these are the words, Divrei Rabbi Meir, words of Rabbi Meir. So this is machlokas. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Kol hamashanim mimapei shetavu chacham v'barachos lo yatsa yidei chavaso. Anyone who changes the matbea that the sages minted in brachos, in brachos, has not fulfilled his obligation. Okay, so which of these two? Let's stop and ask our own question. Which of these two opinions does it seem like is the Rambam's source for halacha 5? Like, in other words, the way that they're, just to go over the view here of how the Rambam works, is the Rambam is. Yeah.
All right. That's so if somebody says it before they eat it, that not like manara, not like how beautiful is this tree. This is like their blessing before eating.
Yeah. Are you asking about whether he has to have intention to fulfill his obligation, or you're just saying like, is the scenario before he's eating?
Is the scenario before he's eating?
Yeah, the scenario is before he's eating. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So the way that the Rambam works is, Rambam says that every statement in the Mishnah Torah is from one of the primary works of Chazal, of Mishnah, Brisa, Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi, Sifra, Sifri, unless he says Yireli, that it seems to me. Okay, so the Rambam is generally speaking going to be just taking, codifying statements that are in the Gemara. So when you have this machlokas here between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir, one of those positions, it's machlokas. Okay, so one of those positions is the source of the Rambam's statement in Hilchos Brachos 1.5. So which position do you think it looks like? Rabbi Meir, who says that if you say, how beautiful is this bread, blessed is the creator who says it, then you're yotzei, or Rabbi Yossi, who says anyone who changes from the matbea that the Chachamim established is not yotzei? Yeah, Ayala?
It sort of to me sounds like maybe he's in the middle in this halakha at least, like the ta.
Okay,
He's not.
because he says ta instead of lo yata?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear you there, and I think that is a possibility. But I guess whose language does it sound like the Rambam is quoting? I'll go back to the. It sounds like Rabbi Yossi, right? Because he says anyone who changes the matbea. I mean, Rabbi Meir doesn't even mention matbea, So anyone who changes from the matbea. So yeah, a good question. Why does why does the Rambam say he's making a mistake, whereas Rabbi Yossi says he has not fulfilled his obligation? Okay, but I would say it sounds like he's going with Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so now Kesef Mishneh goes on. He says like this: V'kasha li, it is difficult to me. Okay, meaning this is a problem. Lama shina Rabbeinu halashon. Because of ino elatoe. Okay, so that's his question. Why did the Rambam change Rabbi Yossi's language? Okay, language, and write ino elatoe. He is only making a mistake. V'chein. Okay, so that's question number one. V'chein yesh ledaktek lama kasav ve'ein roy l'shenosam. And we should also be what's another word for medactic, I guess, instead of nitpicky? There's like a dignified word for being medactic. I have at the tip of my tongue.
Exacting?
Exacting is good. Yeah, we should be exacting and ask, why did the Rambam write, it is not proper to change them? Okay, so I think what he means there is, of course, if someone who changes the bracha is making a mistake, then of course it's not proper. Of course it's not proper to change them. You don't have to say both. So what is the Rambam getting at by saying it's not proper to change them? Okay, to change the brachos. Okay. All right, we go with questions here. 2 questions. Why did he change Rabbi Yossi's language from lo yatsa to eno elatoe? And then also, why did the Rambam write it's not proper to change them? Just say Eino Elatoa, and of course it's not proper to make mistakes. Okay, so let's see the Kesef Mishneh's answer. Venerally seems to me the tre gavne shinui hain. Okay, for those who are familiar with the briskers, Derek, you can make a joke that, oh look, the Kesef Mishneh is a brisker. Okay, that's the joke that some people would make. I'm contractually obligated because I teach at a brisker yeshiva. All right, the tre gavne shinui hain, that there are two types of changes. Okay, ha'echad, one change is shehu omer nusach habracha shetiknu chachamim, is that he says the formulation that the sages enacted, elashu mosif ba o gorea mimena, but he adds to it or detracts from it. O shehu omer ke'ein nusach shetiknu chachamim, or he says something similar, okay, but not the same as, similar to, but not the same as the formulation enacted by the sages. Aval hu omer osa b'milos acheros, and he says it in different words. Umikol makom, but nevertheless, heim romazos lenusach shetiknu chazal. The words he uses allude to the text that Chazal, that the sages enacted. V'kemin shekavanas tavarav ole lamashi tiknu Chazal. I don't know if this is still on the second possibility or if this is on the first. So I'll just comment and do and since the intent of his words, ole lamashi tiknu Chazal corresponds to what Chazal enacted. Ein kan ta'us, there is no mistake here. Aval ein roy lasos kain, but it is not proper to do this. Hashinui hasheni. Okay, so this is all one type of change. The second type of change, hu shemeshane kavanas habracha, is that he changes the intent of the bracha. Kagon, for example, Baruch HaMakom Shabara'ah. Blessed is the foundation of existence, who created it. Okay, now why is that changing the intention? He says Shihi bracha koleles, which is a generic bracha. V'chazal, whereas Chazal tiknu levarach al kol davar bepratus, whereas Chazal enacted that we make a particular, a bracha on the particular, al kol davar bepratus, on everything in particular. Hamoti lechem min haaretz, brei pri ha'etz. Okay, who brings forth bread from the earth, who creates the fruit of the tree, etc. V'al zeh kasav, and regarding this, he wrote she'eno elatoa. He is only making a mistake. V'kevan detoehu, and since he is mistaken, lo yata yidei chavaso, he is not yotze. Ukedivrei Rabbi Yossi, and in accordance with the words of Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so let's stop here and take stock of this. So how is the Kesef? So we had our two questions. Why did the Rambam change? Let's just summarize here. Hold on. Summary. Okay, so question number one is why did the Rambam change Rabbi Yossi's formulation of the halacha from he is not yotze to he is only making a mistake? And then why did the Rambam have to add it is not proper to change them? Okay, so what is the Kesef Mishneh's answer to these two questions? Yeah, Ayala?
So I think his answer to the second question is that the Rambam had to add it because he's referring to a different thing, I
Okay.
think, which is
Yeah. Go ahead.
just changing, like slightly changing the text of Chazal.
Right. So when the Rambam wrote, "It is not proper to change them," he was talking about changing the words to a different but similar meaning, which still corresponds to what Chazal enacted. Okay. And then can we explain why he says it's not like what the implication is if it's not proper? Meaning halachically, what's the
You're still Yotze, I
yeah,
guess.
you're still Yotze, right? So it's not proper implies that you're still Yotze, even though you shouldn't have done that. Okay. What about answer to question number 1? Little less clear. Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe he's clarifying why you're not Yotze, like he's clarifying the type of thing that they're doing wrong, which is that they're making a mistake
Okay. I
in
think
the
that's what
bracha.
he's saying. Yeah, I think that's what he's saying also. I still don't feel like it's satisfactory in the sense of like if he just said you're not Yotze, that would just be it would be clear, like so we'll put this down and then we'll see if we can go on. So and get more clarity. We're actually not done with the Kesef Mishneh yet, but so perhaps the Rambam is explaining why you're not Yotze, namely because you made a mistake in your, I guess, attempt to to I guess to come up, I guess in your formulation, your attempt to formulate an alternative. I don't want to say attempt. I'm just trying. I'm wrestling with the words here. Okay, you made a mistake in deviating from what Chazal enacted. Let's put it that way. Okay, so let's do one other short paragraph of the Kesef Mishneh. The Od Yesh Lomar. Furthermore, one can say. So I don't know if this is an alternative answer just to that last question or to the entire thing. We'll see. Depluxa de Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda? I think this is a typo. I think it should be Rabbi Yossi. Okay, that one can say that the machloket, the disagreement between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi, lav mishum shabara'a, he is not because of the phrase that he created it. Okay, i.e., the fact that the guy used a generic phrase instead of a specific phrase. Okay. Ella rather mipnei she lo hiskir shemu machos. Rather, because he didn't mention the name of God, which is weird because he does say hamakom, and malchus and kingship. Ilo hayamaskir shemu malchus, because if he mentioned the name of God and kingship, the Omer saying, "Blessed are you, Hashem, who created it." L'chule alma yatza. He would be yote according to everyone, right? Because we hold that if you say shalkoni bivaro, then that will cover an apple, even though you should have said brei eitz. Mikol makom, nevertheless, shemaskir afal pi shemaskir shemu malchus, even though he mentioned the name of God and kingship, the Omer inyan habracha, and the inyan of the bracha, the brachos beshinui, with an alteration, toehu, he has made a mistake. Dema betza lashanos, for what profit is there in changing? Im koze yote dechavasa, but nevertheless, he has fulfilled his obligation. Okay, this is interesting. Ulefizeh, and according to this, Mashakasav, that which the Rambam wrote, v'chol ha'mashana, anyone who changes, etc., eno elatoa, is only making a mistake. Adela elkai is referring to the earlier clause or the earlier halacha, shekasav, where he wrote v'ein roy l'shanosa. It is not proper to change it. V'zeh ikar. This is the main explanation. De'ilu lepirusha kama, because according to the first explanation, tikshi, one can raise a difficulty. Mi gara mi barich rachmana mare daipita. How is this any worse than blessed is the merciful one, master of this bread? Okay, which which we say you are yotze, for which we say that you are yotze. Okay, so now Kesef Mishneh, we have to try to summarize this. So now the Kesef Mishneh is giving us a second explanation of how to read the Rambam. What is his second explanation, and how does this answer the two questions differently? Let me just call this answer number one and answer number one to question one, and now we have answer number two to question one and answer number two to question two. Okay, so what is he saying? I'm going to highlight the key part, I think. Yeah, Ella?
I'm not exactly following what he's saying, like where he's referring back to, but I think like the main idea is that when he's saying that you'd make a mistake, like the mistake would be if you do technically like say all the things to have it count as a bracha, but you're not saying like the proper, like you're being too general or something like that. You're, I guess, yeah.
Okay, so maybe this will help. Okay, I think the difference is, actually, I'm gonna just change the order of this, just to make it parallel. Okay, so I think according to the first answer, I'll say this. So unlike answer number one, which interprets he's making a mistake as he's not yotze. This answer interprets he's making a mistake as he shouldn't have done this, but he still is yotze. Okay, that's what we get from this part. Nevertheless, even though he has mentioned the name of God and any of the brachas with an alteration, he has made a mistake. For what profit is there in changing? Like why would you do that? But nevertheless, he has fulfilled his obligation. Okay, and according to this, that which the Rambam wrote, anyone who changes is only making a mistake, is referring to the earlier statement. So we have to figure out what that means. Let's go back to the Rambam. Wait, what did he just say? That which the Rambam wrote, anyone who changes is only making a mistake. Where was that statement in the Rambam? That was, it is not proper to change them. So I think what he's saying is these two statements are just saying the same thing in different words. Ein roy l'shanosan and eino elatoa, meaning that according to his other reading, then there is the ill-advised change of hold on. Yeah. In other words, according to the other reading, according to the first answer, ein roy l'shanosan is one statement, and that's talking about changing the particulars, and then eino elatoa is talking about a change that makes you not yotze. Okay, like he said in Hilchos Kriya Shema. But here it is he's saying that they both mean the same thing. Okay, in other words, ein roy l'shanosan and eino ella toeh are both referring, both mean the same thing. Both mean the same thing. Okay. you shouldn't have done this, but you're yotze. So that's the main difference between answer number 2 and answer number 1. Okay. But now, why did the Rambam have to add? It's not proper to change them, right? See, in other words, according to the first answer, the powerful answer is number 2. Okay, but according to this one, the powerful answer is number 1. Yeah. In other words, according to number 2, the answer to question number 2 is he's just repeating the same thing as Eno Ella Toe, but he's addressing the person before the act instead of after the fact. Like, don't do it, and if you did, you made a mistake. Those are just referring to the same mistake from 2 sides. But according to answer number 1, don't do it, and if you make a mistake, that means you're not yotze. Yeah. It's difficult. Okay. So the Kesef Mishneh ends up liking this one better because so this is the last point here on this part is preference reason for preferring the second answer. Answer number 2 is because we know that blessed is the merciful one, master of this bread, is yotze. So this this seems to clash with the answer number 1, according to which a generic bracha would not be yotze. Yeah. Okay. As I feared, this is a little bit technical. Okay. I want to do one thing now, which is, and I'm a little hesitant. No, I'm hesitant. I'm not going to do it. All right. Okay. So what's the upshot here? In terms of let's go back to our questions on the Rambam here. Okay. So our questions on the Rambam are, increase my. So he says, whoever changes the matbeah is making a mistake, and he has to go back and say the bracha again in accordance with its matbeah. But then in hilchos brachos, if you change the matbeah, then as long as you mention God's name, kingship, and in of the bracha, then you fulfilled your obligation. Okay, which is it? So I know the Kesef Mishneh didn't say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say my working understanding of this is in hilchos kriya shema. Okay, we see from the Rambam's examples that he's talking about the format of the bracha. Okay, not the contents. Okay. Meaning if you mess with the long versus short format, you are not yotze. Okay. But in hilchos brachos, he's referring to the words you use in the bracha. Okay. Not the format. Okay. So I think so it is an equivocal use of the word matbeah. Okay. There's matbeah as the format, and then there's matbeah as the Nusach. I think that's what he's saying right now. Okay, again, I could be wrong about this. This is just my analysis on right now on not very much sleep. Okay, then what's the difference in hilchos kriya shema when he says no one is permitted to detract from them or add to them, and in hilchos brachos when he says it's not proper to change them nor to add to any one of them nor to detract? Okay, so I think he's saying in hilchos kriya shema, he's talking about innovating new brachos. Okay, for example, I'm going to give you examples here. Is like we say hanosein le'ayef. I forget how to spell that. Koach. Okay, which is not found in the Gemara, or she'asani kirtzono. So these are brachos that are not mentioned in the Gemara. Okay, so he's talking about innovating new brachos and or taking away brachos. Okay, so for example, I don't know if this is exactly like the example of taking away brachos, but removing shelo asani goy, okay, because it's offensive. Okay, that would be like an example of like saying, oh, we're going to stop doing that bracha, or maybe merging 2 brachos into one, right? Because you do have some of these machlokim about whether something is let's say like brachos of Torah. Do we say 2 brachos of Torah or 3? Okay, so if you held that we're saying 3 and then you merge them into 1, then that would be detracting from the number of brachos. Okay, but in Hilchos Brachos, he's talking about changing the changing, adding to, or detracting from the contents of the bracha. Okay, namely, it's not proper to change the the I guess intent of Chazal's words. See, this is where we run into the difficulty, right? Because according to because Chazal didn't have those words. The question is, whose words is he referring to? Unless he holds that Chazal did have those words, Yeah, but I'm just gonna say detracting from the contents of the bracha. Okay, I guess in a way that changes the inyan. And then what does he mean in Hilchos Kriyas when he says someone who changes the matbea harizeh toeh in Hilchos Brachos eno ela toeh? So according to the Kesef Mishneh's first answer, both expressions mean you're not yotze. But according to his second answer, you're only not yotze in Kriyas Shema, in Hilchos Kriyas Shema, if you change the format. But in Hilchos Brachos, you're mistaken in that you did something that was ill-advised. Okay. And then to what level would the Rambam be finding changes with the Nusach of the bracha on lechatchila level and b'diavad level? So what do you say about that, based on the sources that we've been doing? Yeah, Ayala?
I think lechatchila, it's not, you shouldn't, but
Right.
b'diavad, as long as you're not actually changing the brachos, it may be fine.
Yeah. So lechatchila, you should never change the Nusach bracha. Okay. But b'diavad, it's still fine as long as you preserve the shem malchus the inyan habracha. Okay. So, but then the question we're left off with is, if the Rambam holds like we do, okay, that Chazal never set up a set script, okay, then why does he take such a strict stance on not changing the exact words? Okay, and if the Rambam disagrees with our assessment and holds by the big myth, okay, why does he, what is his reason? What is his reason for thinking that it's not a myth? Okay, so in other words, bottom line, what is the basis of Rambam's conservatism, given his position on changing the words and preserving the inyan on a b'diavad level, right? So in other words, you have this let's compare the Rambam to the Rashba. So the Rashba says there's no set text, and you can change the middle of the brachos however you want, as long as you don't change the inyan. And the Rambam is saying, yeah, there's no set text, but don't change the inyan. And if you do, okay, fine, you're yote. So what is the machlokes between those two views? And again, I don't want to say that the Rambam disagrees with the Rashba's premise, because it does seem to me, to me, it's conclusive that no one holds that there was an original set text. And I would have to see if the Rambam does say that, somewhere, but I'm not aware of such a thing. Okay, this will be the question that we will that Bli Neder will pick up on next time. Okay, let me just ask you now. This could be a good stopping point, because I do want to end by 12:15 so I can daven at the same time as the minyan. But would you like to stop now, or would you like to go on to just maybe get some facts from something else that we're going to take up next time? I'm fine doing whatever you guys want to do. Or we could also do a an alternative answer to the Kesef Mishneh in the Yad Peshuta. Actually, let's do that. Okay, if you have to go, you have to go. Okay, let's try to do this thing in the Yad Peshuta. We'll just get this out of the way, and we'll see if this works. And again, it's possible that I won't get this today. So the Yad Peshuta is Rav Nachum Rabinovich, or Rabinovich. I don't know how to say it. So he also does what the Kesef Mishneh does, where he's trying to trace the Rambam's sock back to the original sources. So he says, and this is ChatGPT here, so don't like read it. Okay, but he says, I'm not going to type it this time, just for the interest of time. Anyone who changes the matbea of the Chachamim. Brachos mem beis re'e pas v'amar kama na'i paso baruch hamakom shabara yata divrei Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yossi amar kol mashani mipnei shetav chachamim brachos lo yatsi dei chavaso. So he quotes the same machlokas as the Kesef Mishneh. Adkan, okay. Oh, sorry. Adkan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yossi hasam elo mishum de ka'amar bracha lo tekinu rabbanan val amar de tekinu rabbanan filu Rabbi Yossi modeh. Okay, so we have to look at the Gemara there. Yeah, so we're going to set aside the whole thing I said about looking into reasons why we should or shouldn't change the brachos, according to Chazal. Okay, the Chazal setup. Red. Let me actually look up Yossi. No. Yeah. Okay. So so this is the Gemara we were referring to. So name it Ketanai, say according to the Tanaim, it's Machlokas Tanaim, Ra pas v'amar kama na'i pas zo, baruch hamakom shabra yata. Ra teina v'amar kama na'i teina zo, baruch hamakom shabra yata. Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi amar kol moshe mibnei shecham shetavu brachos lo yata. Yidei chavasa. Nema Rav Huna d'amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yochanan d'amar Rabbi Meir. I'm not sure the context. Amar lach Rav Huna, ana da'amari afilu Rabbi Meir ad kan lo amar Rabbi Meir hasam. Okay, so he's saying that the Gemara says that according to Rabbi Meir would only agree if you mentioned bread. But if you didn't mention bread, if you just said kama na is zo, that would be a truly generic bracha, and you would not be able to even according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan amar lach ana da amari afilu Rabbi Yossi adkan lo amar Rabbi Yossi hasam elo mishum de amar bracha de lo takinu rabbanan val amar shahal kol nihe bidvaro de takinu rabbanan afilu Rabbi Yossi modeh. So Rabbi Yossi only stated his opinion that one who alters the formula of the blessing does not fulfill his obligation there because he recited a blessing that was not instituted by the sages, meaning he made up his own words. However, if he recited shekol nihe bidvaro, then Rabbi Yossi would agree that you're yote. All right. Yad Peshuta goes on. Binyamin Raya, so Binyamin the shepherd, Karach Riftav Amar, so he wrapped bread and he said, Baruch Mare Tahai Pita, blessed is the master of this bread. Amar Rav said, Yatza, you're Yotze. Afagav to Amra B'lashon Chol, even if he said it in secular language, because he's saying it in Aramaic. Salzaka Daitach Amina, Hanimili to Amra B'lashon Chol, Kihechi de Tekinu Rabbanan B'lashon Kodesh. You might think that the reason why he's yote in a secular language is because he said it according to what the Chachamim decreed in the Lashon HaKodesh, meaning he just basically said a translation of the bracha, but he said the bracha. Avalo Amr b'lashon chol, but if he didn't say it in a secular language, Kiheri de Tekinu Rabbanan b'lashon Kodesh, if he didn't say it in a secular language the way that the Rabbanan said it, Emalo, maybe he's not yote, Kamash lan he is yote. So what emerges from this is that even if you say a bracha in a secular language and you don't say it as a translation of what Chazal enacted, but you say like, your own like formulation, blesses the master of the bread, then you're still yote. So that's like the bare minimum. That's where the Rambam gets it from, that if you preserve the inyan of the bracha and shem and malchus, then you're yote. Because I guess master of the bread is both a name and acknowledging kingship, maybe. I don't know. Okay, gufa. So what about the text itself? Amar Rav, kol bracha she'ein ba haskar she'ein a bracha. Okay, so that's going to be problematic. Any bracha that doesn't have a mention of the name of God you're not yote. Rabbi Yochanan Amar kol bracha she'ein ba malchus ein a bracha. Any bracha that doesn't have kingship is not yote. Okay, so now we have this not contradiction, this case of Binyamin Raya, who said, blessed is the master of this bread, and he doesn't mention God's name or malchus. And then you have Rav, who adds, you have to mention God's name, and you have Rabbi Yochanan says you have to mention malchus. So I think what the Yad Peshuta is saying is this is where the Rambam gets his conclusion, which is you need three things: the inyan of the bracha that we get from Binyamin Raya, you need God's name, which we get from Rav, and you need malchus, which we get from Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so that's the Rambam in those sources. Harif zal lo hetik as a brisa de Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yossi. The Rif does not bring down the brisa with the machlokas Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yossi. Vehebi rak as de Rav Rabbi Yochanan umasik zal. So the Rif only brings down the words of Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, and he concludes v'kaimlan Rabbi Yochanan de Amar ba'inan haskaras Hashem umachos. We hold like Rabbi Yochanan, who said that we need to mention God's name and kingship. Al kopanim, so this is the Yad Peshuta saying, Al kopanim nira min asugya shelo b'chol shinui matbea eno yote. That it, from the entire sugya, it seems like not every change in the matbea invalidates it. Ela davka imshina es ha'inyan legamre o shechiser shem umalchus shebezeh batal mimeno matbea shel bracha. Only if you change the inyan of the bracha completely, or you're lacking shem and malchus, then the matbea is gone. About shinui she'eno yisodi, but change which is not fundamental, af shelchatchila eno ratzoi, even though it's not desirable l'chatchila, mikol machem b'diavad yata. Nevertheless, you're yota b'diavad. So same conclusion that we have from the conclusion of the Kesef Mishneh. Okay, now we get to this tshuva. Nishal Rabbeinu lahasbir inyan zeb ubifrat hamemra shel Rabbi Yossi. The Rambam in one of the tshuvos was asked to explain this statement of Rabbi Yossi. Okay. Badavar Ma'amar HaMishnah, regarding the statement in the Mishnah Sota Zayin Amud Aleph, the Elu Nemaran B'chol Lashon. So the Mishnah there says these may be said in any language. Parsha Sota Uvidu Meiser Kriya Shema Utfila Ubirkas Mazon. So it says in the Gemara that you can say Tefillah and Birkas Mazon in any language. Shenir Milashono Habrura Shesomchin Al Ha'inyanim Levad V'lo Hamilim. So that implies that we rely only on the words, only on the concepts, not on the exact words. Because if you were relying on the exact words, then you couldn't say it in another language because you can't translate exactly. Not only you can't translate exactly, it would not be the exact words. V'shehapiyutim shechubru lemoadim im ha'inyanim nishmarim behem bichlalusam motzim yedei chova afa pishlo niskar anyano shel kol prat uprat min hapratim zulasi chasimas abracha levad. Okay, so this is introducing a can of worms here. So piyutim are liturgical poems, which we are familiar with in cases. So, for example, in the bracha of Shacharis before Kriya Shema, we have Yotzer or Uvore Choshech Ose Shalom Uvore Sakol, and then we say Hameir La'aretz V'Ladayin Aleha. Okay, but on Shabbos, Ashkenazim say, hate how Sfaria goes all the way back. On Shabbos, Ashkenazim say Yoter or then Hakoyo Ducha Vakoy Shabchucha, and then we sing Kel Adon Al Kol Hamasim, and then we revert back to Lakel Sher Shabbos Mikol Hamasim V'Yom HaShvi, and then we go to Hamir La'aretz. So I don't know what people think of it in terms of like your experience. This is a piyut. Okay, this whole thing we say here is a piyut. It's a poem that we insert special on Shabbos. And in many shuls throughout the ages, it would not just be an insertion of a piyut. They would actually swap out and have different versions of brachos for holidays and for not holidays. Okay, so the question that the Rambam was asked is, what about if you switch out a regular bracha with a piyut, where Afo pi shelo nizkar inyano shel kol prat uprat min hapratim zulasi chasimas habracha b'levad, that the only thing that is the same is the conclusion of the bracha. Ubao b'talmud ma'amarim acherim shenire mehem shesomchim al nusach shekavu chazal b'milos of ha'ivrios. And there are other statements in the Talmud that appear that we rely on the formulation that Chazal instituted with Hebrew words. Mehem mashi hikpidu al mila achas. So cases where the Chazal are makpid on one word. V'hi avas olam, the ava rabba. So the Gemara says that we say avas olam in one case and ava rabba in another case. Anyone who doesn't say emes v'yatziv in Shachris after Kriya Shema and emes v'emuna in Mariv has not fulfilled your obligation. So if you swap them, then you're not yotze. Okay, and we have the statement that if you change the matbea, then you're making a mistake. So then there's another statement that seems the opposite, that says, if a person at the end of every bracha wants to say something that is in line with the theme of the bracha, meaning if you want to add, then you can say it. So that implies that you can add to the bracha. Also, it says that that Rabbi Shimon HaPikuli arranged 18 brachos in order before Rabban Gamliel. V'chiyuvim asher chivu b'kriyas shema v'hadiug asher zachru v'tanaim haniskarim b'birkas hamazon asher im hefer k'tasam o lo amar b'niktasam v'hiktim o icher v'sar min had-seder shetiskinu lo yetzedei chavasa. So there are all these halachos in kriyas shema, and in the conditions about birkas hamazon, that if you omit some of them or remove some of them, then you're not yotze. Mamar HaMishnah, same thing with the Mishnah. Aval korin osa leloazos balaz v'hi sheksuva balaz. V'tanya goftis the giftim use the ivrim shenir mehem shuhu lechatchila v'achkach nemar shuhu yotze mimashmaos diavad. Ki amar achkach v'haloes shama ashuris yata. So you have halachos in Megillah where really you should, hold on. You can read the Megillah to other people in their foreign languages as long as it's written in the foreign language. But then we say that if you read to a foreign speaker in Hebrew, then you're yote. Yetiv hadaraso hakdosha levair kol mash kadam zvacharam uskara kaful min hashmayim. Okay, so this was the question. Basically, this is the text of the question that was sent to the Rambam: is what's the deal? Like, can you add piyutim? Can you not? Can you change stuff? How makpid are Chazal on the exact text? Because sometimes you find individual words they're makpid on, but then other times it sounds like they have room to play around. So it's basically the question we were asking. Okay, so what is the Rambam's answer? Short answer, or not short, but not as long as that. Asur l'shanos mimatbei shetavu chachamim b'brachos b'shum panim v'chol mishane ta'a. It is usher to change the matbei that the Chachamim established in any way, and anyone who changes has made a mistake. When you guys quoted Sota, the Mishnah in Sota that says that you can say these things in any language, that's not a proof. In those cases, you're not adding to the concepts or taking away the concepts, you're just changing the language. This is not like adding piyutim where they bring in many other concepts and many other matters that are not at all having to do with the tefilah. And then they add with their poetic meter and their melody. And they take tefilah and they make it into a joke. This is the reason why, this is the biggest reason for why the Hamon has no kavana, and they make light of l'shocheach be'emsa tefillah. I don't know if that means that they make light of like conversing in the middle of tefillah. What does it say here? To talk during tefillah. Because they sense that these things that people are saying are not obligatory. Right? So like, the examples for us would be like, if someone talks during Kel Adon, they, to them, it's like, okay, it's clear that this is extra. We're just adding this in. So, so we don't have to take it seriously. Also, the words of these piyutim are words of poets, not of Talmid Chachamim. Achi ru'im lehischanein b'divrei liskar b'hem l'Hashem. They're not words of Chachamim that would be proper to use to draw close to Hashem. V'shiyasiru min hadvarim shechibru hanavim. Oh wait, sorry, hold on. Achi ru'im lehischanein b'divrei liskar b'hem l'Hashem. They're not worthy of being used to plead with God or draw close to him. And they also detract from the words that were composed by Nevi'im or people close to Nevi'im. Al kulum hashalom v'ratzon Hashem. On all of them, I think this is like saying, God, may God have mercy. What is it saying here? Oh, okay. All right. Or he's just saying, may God have peace upon the Nevi'im. Okay, Umashamar Yatza. So when I said that you're Yote, Harihu Mish and Mavin Ashuris. Sorry, when the Gemara says Yatza, Harihu Mish and Mavin Ashuris the Giftis. That's someone who understands Hebrew and Giftis. By Yoser Roishi Yikari Ashuris V'im Shama Giftis V'hu Mavin Yatza. Okay, so that is by Megillah. Okay, so what it sounds like the Rambam is saying so far is that Rambam is against making any changes. Okay, and it sounds pretty definitive that you shouldn't make any changes. But it's funny because he doesn't say you're not yotze. He just says that you're making a mistake. Okay, so then Rabinovich says, "Klal ha'olam mitshuva zo u'mishtei tshuva shevesi le'el hu shekol mashanim hamashanim mimavei shetav chachamim bebrachos va'afilu ein hashinu yisodi eino ela toeh shenusach habrachos tiknu anshe knesses hagdola uvahem kamanavim umi ya'avu acharim l'shanos." So anyone who changes the matbea that the Chachamim established, even if it's not a fundamental change, is only making a mistake because the Nusach of the Brachos was established by the Anshe Knesset HaGedola, and among them were many Nevi'im, and who can come after them to change it? Vafilu kavanaso rutuya eno elatoe. Even if you have good kavana, then you're making a mistake. Aval im hashinu hu yisodi, but if it's a fundamental change, kagon shehechsir hazkar Hashem u'malchus v'kiyotze b'zeh devarim hama'akvim lo yasadei chavaso. But if you it's a fundamental, like you change the mention of God's name and malchus and other things that are ma'akev, you're not yotze. V'hishve hilchos kriya shema Aleph Zayin Shagam Sham maybe Rabbeinu as Divrei Rabbi Yossi Ella Sham Seder as Hadvarim Beseder Shona V'al Pizeh Mashmaos Mishtane. So there he brings the words of Rabbi Yossi, but he changes it, and his intention changes. V'zeh Lashano Brachos Elu Im Shar Brachos. Okay, so he quotes the whole thing. Hare Shasham Pirish Mikodem Elu Dvarim Kovim Es HaMatbea V'hem Kulam Ma'akvim. There he says which things set the matbea, and they're all ma'akev. L'fikach mesik shechozer mevarach. That's why he concludes that you are mevarach. You have to go back and make the bracha again. Mash ein kein kan shelo yard lefaret kol hashinuim hama'akvim l'fikach hiktim es apiska kol hamashane v'hishve la mashmaos klalis yoser commotion ispar v'hanyu shekazav kan eno elatoa v'daik haradvaz zal kolomar eno chozer elatoa. He doesn't have to go back, but he's making a mistake. Okay, and then the end, the ayin hetiv b'halachos tefilah yod sheb'lashon ta kol rabbeinu tu'uyos shonos. When the Rambam uses the word toeh, he means different kinds of errors. Yesh ke'elosh ma'akvin v'chozer l'rosh v'yesh asher b'di'avad yatsa afal pi shata. So toeh does not mean definitively that you should or should not go back. Agav roy latayin es kvar ki kvar amad mahadir al kach shemitok lashon hashoalim sheheviu es divrei Rabbi Yossi muchach shagam lifnehem b'gemara haisa girsa eno ela toeh. Okay, so it sounds like the Yad Peshuta is still concluding like the Kesef Mishneh that not all changes are ma'akev, that it's only fundamental changes, and that the Rambam is dead set against l'chatchila making any changes. But it sounds like the Yad Peshuta is saying that the Rambam does hold that the Nusach of these brachos was established by the Nevi'im, okay, which I don't know if that's the Rambam or if that's the Yad Peshuta's interpretation of the Rambam, but it does sound like he is going back to the big myth. So what we need to see is, does the Rambam actually hold that what the Rashba says is a myth really is the truth? Or does the Rambam agree that there was no original Nusach, but the Rambam's conservatism is coming from some other source? For example, like saying that the people who authored our tefilos were chachamim, but these poets who add stuff to tefillah don't necessarily know what they're talking about. Okay, so this ended up being a very technical shiur. Okay, I apologize if it was too technical. It satisfied me because my goal was to go through this and examine the Rambam Shita and see if it is in line with what we've established so far, and to what extent do we need to research it more. So next time, hopefully, we'll go through which changes are advisable to make and which ones not. Since we didn't get to what I intended to, it's possible I'll decide to give shiur next Friday, but we'll have to see how my Connecticut time turns out. Okay, but I got to sign off now. All right, thanks for coming, and no Thursday shiur next week. But I did ask Jessie Fishbein if she wants to give shiur, and she'll get back to me before midway next week. So there may be shiur next week, just not my shiur. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Bye.